Last time on Wanderlust. So, my suggestion is there's giant predatory birds.
I think we all kind of agree that we need to do it, and then companies are like, we don't want to, but then they're like, wait, we can make a lot of money off of this, we want to do this now.
This idea of having city-states is cool. I also like the idea of those slowly folding themselves into large corporations.
There's like all these commercials of basically like whatever the friend dating app is in selling the idea of like living in close quarters with other people.
We all need to make Eco Urbs, and then it's like every city-state, you do your own thing. Like, we'll play by the rules, but we don't need your help.
There's definitely a generational divide.
Okay, yeah. Young people move first.
We either have to figure out how to make it here where we are. We don't have it.
Oh, I like that.
Or like whatever it is of getting what we used to have here in this smaller area.
Tagging onto that, I think part of the draw of the Eco Urbs is that the government has set up communication centers in each Eco Urb. Sports become a much bigger deal.
That's pushed people towards kind of seeking faith again because things got pretty rough.
Somebody is instilled as the person in charge, at the very least, just to help get it organized.
Why does this initial move fail?
I think there are people out there who own 10 acres of land and they do not want to give that up.
They're developing a product that only they can sell. They've worked out this system. They figured it out. Now they'll sell it to an Eco Urb for a bunch of money.
These companies aren't sharing their technological advancements.
But if something breaks, the people in the Eco Urb don't know how to fix it. They have to call in a company to do it for them. Young people stop moving to Eco Urbs because it gets so bad there. So it's like if you move to these Eco Urbs, you're basically buying into debt.
There's also probably some tension, like you said before, but this would be an issue between the people in charge and the people who have moved there.
To remind everybody where we left off at the last episode, the Eco Urbs were established and running fairly well, but the largest issue that they were facing was the infrastructure and machinery of the Eco Urbs was still being sold to the Eco Urbs by and maintained by large companies that would take payment in basically work or time, whatever the Eco Urb could provide, which kind of took the Eco Urbs from being these like wonderful places of gardening and long-term relaxation to just now you work 20 hours a week to make your food and then you got to work 80 hours a week at the fulfillment center, which is fairly miserable. So this is the era of there is a failure why these Eco Urbs are not working, which this is the main one, that the technology is proprietary and not shared. And also not everyone has moved to them yet. That was kind of a different issue, but whatever. So now the next era that we're moving to is a solution. This is where the communities come together to solve a problem, right? In this case, it's an internal one of the Eco Urbs failing due to the reasons that I just said. So the kickoff of this era is when the first Eco Urb severs the tie. So basically, if you were a person just in a different Eco Urb, at this point now we have pretty decent radio communication between Eco Urbs. There is some, news getting around, but it's much slower than it is right now. You don't have the internet yet, right? Basically, messages go out from this Eco Urb that just goes like, we're cutting the rail tracks to our Eco Urb. So, whatever bridge there is over water, they cut that. That's done. It's one that's probably pretty far away from the major city centers and just go, yeah, we're on our own now. We're not paying you back and we're basically declaring independence from all of this. Technically we're in debt, but we're not going to pay that back and we're not going to ask you for help anymore. We think we figured this out on our own. And that Eco Urb, the communication from it goes dark. So now what we have to decide is how does society respond and what does this time of kind of turbulence look like as society moves from the Eco Urbs being basically a way to feed people so they can continue feeding into an early form of consumerism to actually investing in the Eco Urbs as like self-sustaining little isolated communities.
When you say it goes dark, do you mean that the Eco Urb itself cut itself off? As in, did they completely shut off all radio communications? Are they talking with other Eco Urbs? Or was this just like a complete shutdown of like, we aren't talking to the company anymore? Or are they like completely isolated?
A little bit of both. So the communication is wireless, right? This was like they first got satellites up, so this is satellite done communication. So they didn't like put up a giant bubble around their city to block satellite communication, but they're not talking anymore and they cannot receive messages however that happened. Do you know what I mean?
Is that because of the Eco Urb?
That is because of the Eco Urb.
Okay, so the government or the company has not shut them off.
Company would want them to still be working for them, and they just said no. And then, like, the only thing you know is that, like, whatever rail track there was over natural boundaries was cut there. So you can't just run a train out there immediately. You know what I mean? You're gonna be trekking through half wasteland, half wilds at this point to get to the city now.
And was this at a point where communication was still through like a centralized hub in each Eco Urb?
Yes, that is still the case. Yep.
Because we had the little like dial cafes.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
So I have some stuff that I know is going to happen with that, but how do we think society at large responds? Specifically, like where government central power is right now, like those cities that are slowly emptying, as well as then the companies that, you know, technically are owed labor from this place that now just said we're not paying it back.
I think companies with other Eco Urbs start making moves to kind of like throw in incentives or gifts to the Eco Urbs that are still there to kind of put in the token effort of like, we appreciate you and celebrate you for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, like, we appreciate that you're a part of the team. You're really part of the Globodyne Industries family.
Yeah, it's the thing that people say where, like, if you have to have a day of the year celebrating you, it means you don't get paid enough. It's that thing.
Yeah, I think they have to, like, start, like, rolling out company bucks more. Like, it's just, like, this thing that's, like, very nebulous. It's like, we're giving you a bonus. You get, like, 20 company bucks. Well, what does 20 company bucks get me? It's like, well, we'll decide like what we think that's worth.
Yeah.
So it doesn't cost us anything, really.
It's like that I have an Amazon credit card. Thanks, Zach.
Well, I was thinking more of frequent flyer miles. It's like, yeah, right. How much does a frequent flyer mile get me? And it's just like, whatever we decide in the moment that's cheap to give you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like how you get those frequent flyer miles, and how much does it cost to redeem for this flight? 900,000 miles. Like, is not nearly that far away.
Right. That's more what I was thinking, not your Amazon gift card, but, you know, if you want it to be your Amazon gift card or credit card.
Credit card. I have an Amazon credit card.
I think that probably the government is, like, realizing that for them, this is going to be much more of a struggle to maintain the power.
Yeah.
Because basically what they've done is, even though they have their guys in place, being cut off means that they are kind of doing their own thing, and that means like the actual people in charge of each Eco Urb could just choose to like, hey, look, they're telling me to do this, but like, I like you guys, or I don't like you guys, so I'm gonna move in a different direction. And while the government is realizing like, oh shoot, I guess we don't really like, what are we gonna do to fix that? Companies are probably starting to turn to them and being like, hey, they aren't paying us.
Yeah, that's basically, this is asking, how does our government handle, there is mass crime. Like, this is basically theft. You know, they're just being like, all that stuff you sent us that we're supposed to pay you for, we're not. We're just not going to pay for it. Bye. You know, but it's like a whole city that they're going to have to decide what to do with, you know. And I think the other thing that I'd like to throw in at this time is the cities are quickly becoming ghost towns. There's still people there, and probably still a fair number of people there, but not nearly as many as first demanded this infrastructure just because there is not food to feed people.
This is the desert cities, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So the cities are largely emptying into Eco Urbs because it's the only place where there's food. Anyway, Zach, I interrupted you. Sorry. And I interrupted you again. I did it again. On a roll.
It's my turn.
Do we get to decide when other Eco Urbs start going dark?
For right now, what I am asking is, how does society respond? I have answers to that are, my DM sprinklings, and then we'll get into that.
My thought was, I think, because do the governments still have, vagaries of military force?
So we talked about before that military service was compulsory for people of a certain age, and it was mostly border patrols to fend off bandits from the farmland, right? That was largely what was being done. Is you had large cities just in the middle of nowhere, and then what the military largely did was patrol the, borderland that was just crops forever to keep people from... Because it was, kind of skirmishes and raids of coming over, stealing stuff, then coming back, And so it would be, border guards fighting mercenaries, and those mercenaries were probably sent by, the nation to the north of you, but it was never really said, it was always kind of this vagity thing. The first time there was open war was when that, giant flood hit, or was it a tsunami hit, or whatever?
Yeah.
That, destroyed the entire city, which was the first time that had happened. So, military service largely young people.
So I think what happens is the city government that's closest to this Eco Urb, that, it's technically their jurisdiction, is we're going to send our military. But they realize they don't have military in the same way anymore, because a lot of young people are gone. And even if they weren't, just the percentage of people they have is just significantly smaller. So they're okay, we're going to suit up who we have. We're going to send them out and just do, a show of force to retake this Eco Urb and be you have to pay this. But then, as they start going out, all the Eco Urbs that are, on their path are just kind of we're not going to help you.
Okay.
Where it's all of a sudden, they're we have a supply chain. We'll just hop from Eco Urb to Eco Urb until we get to the one that's, blacked out, and we'll take it back. And then they get to an Eco Urb and they're you can't stay here. We're not giving you any food.
Well, and you probably have, even if they're not congregated in one Eco Urb, you probably have a lot of the young people who were in the military now in these Eco Urbs, because the young people were the ones who were incentivized to really start them up. So you probably have people who know how to defend the Eco Urbs. So it's you aren't going to have... You don't want your military to fight your vets.
Right. And I think as they get closer to the blackout ones, it gets more and more hostile.
So let me spin this a little bit, right? So let's play this out, right? This Eco Urb goes dark, and they go, okay, we're going to try to communicate with them. They don't. So then this company goes okay, well, we're going to, report this to the police, right? There would be police. So they go to the police and say, all right, what? These people are stealing from us. We want you to go and basically repossess all of our equipment from this Eco Urb. What do we think? Let's start with the police. What do we think they say? How does that play out? As technically they are pressing criminal charges, right? They're stealing from us. This is robbery. I like where it gets to. I think I agree with where it gets to. I want to talk out the early part as well.
I think the police go, not my jurisdiction. That's 1,000 miles away.
Okay.
I don't want to deal with that. Kind of if you reported a crime in Florida, in Seattle, you're it's not my problem. Talk to the people in the Eco Urb. They're the police that need to take this back.
Okay, I like that idea.
Yeah, I think it's also not just not my jurisdiction, but this is much bigger than me. It's you don't want the local police. You want to bring this up to the FBI.
Okay, so that fails just for not my jurisdiction, becomes a military matter, and they try to start moving through Eco Urbs on whatever mass transit exists between them, which, as we said, is expensive, slow, and not typically used, right? This is not a super common thing to transfer a lot of people. So I think what would play out basically in that case is having to establish the supply line first. If we try to send 100 guys to this Eco Urb, can they stay there? Can they be fed? You know what I mean? Or is this, we're going to have to make this trek the entire way and send food there somehow, like on rail the entire way. Does that make sense?
Are you talking about about the like a military going there, or talking about?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times isn't military sent with like their own provisions?
Sure, but I mean, even provisioning is difficult, right?
Oh, yeah,
like, this is a time when food is extremely scarce, so provisioning would be very hard for a larger than that force, right?
My thought is that they bring enough provisions that's like, oh, like, in case they had to, like, walk it kind of idea. Like, they're not going to, but they're like, oh, we have, like, basically enough to make the trip out there, and we can resupply at every Eco Urb on the way.
Right, that's what I mean.
So basically, like, they have, like, enough supplies to get out there if no one supplied them.
Yeah.
But, like, not to siege, not to do anything. It's just like, we have the bare minimum in case, like, we break down and have to hike for 10 days to get to the next Eco Urb.
So then I think what ends up being kind of the borders of this starts being there are Eco Urbs moving away from the cities, right? At some point you hit land that can be farmed. That is where the Eco Urbs would begin to start popping up, right? So they start trying to go hop from one to one to one. Do we think it's basically like they get so far and then just start getting turned away and then have to like deal with going like, okay, we now have control over this X number of Eco Urbs, and it's kind of like a slow march as they're going through?
I think what happens, in my opinion, is the Eco Urbs are like on the brink of being sustainable. So by having this influx of a military come in and be like, we need food, you're putting them into a deficit all of a sudden. They're like, we don't have enough food when you come in. And they're like, well, we need this food. And like for the first couple, they like just take the food and they're like, we don't care. We're the military. We do what we want. And then I think they start getting turned away.
Well, and it's also closer.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the Eco Urb that like went dark first is like probably one of the ones that's furthest away from anybody. And that's part of the reason is because they had to become self-sustaining ASAP because it's not like they can rely on the city at all. So like maybe the first 3 Eco Urbs like technically could get supplies from a city pretty quickly if they like really, really needed something. But yeah, once you hit like the 4th Eco Urb, it's like, hey, we can't help you at this point. You're going to have to, like, you are going to be taking food from like kids, which I don't think your military is supposed to do against your own people.
By our constitution, no, but that's not necessarily true everywhere.
And I also imagine that as this starts happening, like messages get sent from Eco Urb to Eco Urb saying, hey, this is happening. This is what's going to happen if we try to go independent. Do we want to stay under the heel of this any longer? And so it starts to foment a little bit of rebellion.
So that then transitions us to what is this Eco Urb that went dark doing? So Zach, this is what you brought up. So I think that 2 things happen. I'll start with one. Whatever Eco Urb is closest and along natural like waterways, this is where, because this was like something I liked in the setting as an idea, this is where shipboat captains or like riverboat captains start becoming important. This is the way that at first Eco Urbs start spreading the ability, like the knowledge and like personnel resources to repair them without using like company resources is done by transporting people like riverboat to riverboat or like via riverboat, right? So, well, you know, whatever ragtag military can be scrounged up from like old corporate people and who they can convince in Eco Urbs is like marching across and seeing who will house them and who won't. I think the opposite, from the opposite direction, is where you start seeing like riverboat traffic of like, hey, we can fix these Eco Urbs for you so they don't break and you don't owe us anything.
Right. I think they just come in, they're like, this is broken, we'll fix it for you. And they're like, what do you want? We're like, absolutely nothing.
Don't pay them anymore. That's it.
I think, okay, so I have a thought for kind of how this like started, and this is kind of jumping back a little bit. But I think someone from the like company ended up at the Eco Urb that went dark. And it's somebody who had either friends or like people that were close to him that were like in that Eco Urb. And so, you know, you're out there for so long because it's such a far distance away that you like talk with them and they start becoming your friends, your family. And this one guy is the one who was like, you know what? This is just stupid. Like, you guys are clearly doing this on your own. I really like being out here. I can just keep doing this for you. And then that's why they go dark.
Yeah. No, I like that idea as like, I think my only addition is it should definitely be like a love story, you know?
Okay.
Of course.
You can make it a love story. Well, maybe, you know, it's somebody who maybe the love story is that it's somebody from the Eco Urb next to it, and that's how the riverboat starts.
Oh, that's a cute idea. I like that. Like, oh, I gotta go and see my boyfriend. You know, we were talking in the chat rooms, then those shut off, you know.
I'm going to argue that it isn't necessarily a love story, but every retelling of it is.
It just keeps changing, yeah.
Like in Era 5 when we're playing the game, like this is like this story is just like always a love story.
That's cute. Yeah, I like that. It's like a retold thing, like either the first riverboat journey or like, you know, the first Eco Urb to go dark. It's because someone just falls in love and it means so much to them. Yeah, I like that. That's a cute idea.
Right, like did it necessarily happen like that? Who knows, but
this is a cute retelling of it.
Yeah, it turns into like this Romeo and Juliet vibe of like leaving the evil corporation to be with your love in the Eco Urb. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Okay, so what we have now is two like expanding sides that are basically like one side is trying to basically maintain a military presence in Eco Urbs to convince them not to do this. And the other side is slowly sending people out to be like, hey, we can fix your Eco Urb. We'll teach you how to do it. I think what goes along with that is a secondary form of communication that's set up by actual physical travel between the sites. That form allows like information to be sent between the Eco Urbs. So like as they go and add more into their network, they can start sending information a lot faster. So the Eco Urbs that are like splitting off have faster communication between them. Does that make sense?
Are you thinking like they give each other flash drives or they send mail?
So this was where we kind of talked after we shut off the recording last time. This would be how they set up being able to do data transfers quickly over their network. Basically, this is computer communication rather than radio communication.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly how we get to this point, but I think at some point the government kind of realizes like, okay, we're draining so much money trying to send these people out to like retake this Eco Urb, and like they're losing so much influence by doing so they're not able to, as far as I know, they aren't able to retake this Eco Urb, and at the very least it's wasting resources. So I think the government has to like go we either have to like completely side with the corporation to do this, or we just say screw it to keep our power.
Well, I think that's actually an interesting point of like who is funding this at some point, because like they would probably still have some agriculture, you know, like whatever blight killed most of the crops wouldn't necessarily kill every single one. So they're still doing some kind of industrial farming somewhere, right? And that's how they would be feeding all of these people.
Or maybe there's areas of the world that the blight hasn't spread to yet, but it's coming.
Right. So they know that this is going to be a problem, right? So that this is on borrowed time as it is. So, you know, you go, all right, we need to have a military that can get all the way across the world to go and take this Eco Urb back, right? And they expect to have support from all the Eco Urbs, and as they're going, it's like, 1, there isn't actually a lot of food to go around. 2, some of the Eco Urbs are not thrilled about, you know, giving them food. So this is maybe where you start seeing squabbles, like not necessarily like all out massacres, but probably some violence breaking out, civil unrest in some of the Eco Urbs, especially the further out you get. And then 3, there is the issue of they would actually start running up against borders. Like there are actually Eco Urbs now that are more than one, as by the time they get out there, that are self-sustaining and defended, right? Like actively turning them away because they have switched sides. The fatigue of that, right? If this is like a military force furnished by the government from collected taxes, is going to get tricky as they start making less and less money, and less Eco Urbs would be paying taxes, and less food is available. And this is like expending resources rather than making them. So then I think it would, so I guess, yeah, how do we see that pressure working out? Does the government just eventually give up and go, we're not doing this anymore? Like, we're calling this a stalemate? Like,
I kind of think that the person who is in charge, at least of one of these city-states, I think that at some point they realize that they have to give up some of the Eco Urbs to keep control of the ones that they do have.
yeah.
And so they probably try to tighten the purse strings, tighten the circle of their influence, and kind of go, you know what? That one's way out there. If they're not going to do this, then they're on their own. And
Gotcha.
so like they also, even though the Eco Urbs cut themselves off, they cut themselves off too. So they're like, we're done with you. And as far as they know, they're just people out in the wild, but you know, they are, especially the ones that cut themselves off first, because they like physically cut themselves off too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they make a big show of being like, you know, those people out there, they don't get all of these benefits.
Yeah.
Like, they can't, if something goes wrong, like a campaign of like, you know, when something goes wrong, we're here.
Yeah.
Whereas like the implication being those people out there, something goes wrong, like, tough for them, they left, you know?
I like the propaganda. Yeah, that's fun.
I feel like I'm doing the propaganda a lot. I don't know what that says about
No,
me.
I mean, it's important, you know, it's a part of it, like trying to win over the emotions.
I think the other thing that I want to add to this, if you guys are cool with it, is I think the corporations are not happy with this arrangement at all.
Oh, absolutely not.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it's like becomes this like they start like the governments and corporations kind of just start eating themselves, where it's just like the government's like, we're not sending any more people off, we're cutting them off, whatever. We'll just keep our like 20 Eco Urbs we have. But every time a new one goes dark, the corporation's like, you got to send a military out. So they keep like half sending a military out like kind of constantly. So it's like not stopping the drain of resources, but it's not as expensive.
Moving all the way back, what do we imagine conflict looks like in our world at this time, right? So we can imagine at some point people picked up sticks and hit each other with sticks. And then they started throwing those sticks. And then they got really good at throwing those sticks. And basically that's what military conflict is getting better and better and better at throwing sticks at each other. So, what is the thrown stick of the time?
Are we having a stick measuring contest? Is that what
Yeah. What does slapping sticks against each other look like? Do people use the Minecraft stone axe, or is it rail guns, or, you know?
I like railguns. I think that's like a fun sci-fi-y thing.
Now, are those like large tank-sized immovable railguns or handheld mini railgun?
My thought is like spear-throwing railguns.
Well, and I guess what the question here is, the armed conflict then is basically at the level of guns. Like, that is commonly had by most people, or havable by, you know, any military.
Because railguns are brutal. They, like, leave a hole clean through you.
Well, I mean, so do guns. This is what guns do, and bows.
I would say it's like guns are commonplace, but we have not gotten precision out of them yet, or like our gun equivalent. So it's like Civil
like
War.
Wild West?
It was Wild West, Civil War, where it's like you can have these things, they're kind of common, but like odds that you hit something are not super great yet.
Okay.
Even if you're good, so it's kind of like scattershot, you know, you're like, you pull the trigger and hope for the best.
Other people are welcome to jump in too if you have other thoughts.
So, I'm just gonna throw this out there, and I can take this out of the podcast, but personally, I would kind of like to move away from gun.
I would second that.
Yeah, and like, I would prefer to go more sci-fi and call it like blaster, or like go in that direction if we want to, but even then I'm kind of like hesitant because I would like to keep gun to a minimum or out of it personally.
Maybe like electric weapons?
Lightning coils.
I can get behind
I can
it.
get behind lightning coils.
Oh, they look like they just have wizards, so they're like doing staffs. Lightning bolt! Lightning bolt!
Oh, I just had an awesome idea. So I know this isn't really what solar punk means, but I just had an image in my head of someone having a weapon that this would only really be effective in daytime. So nighttime battles, these wouldn't really work. But it basically just pulls in the light of the sun. It's a solar powered like phaser, effectively. That is basically just a magnifying glass, but it like focuses the light so much that it's basically a little laser.
I kind of love that. And yeah, call it something not gun, but yeah, no, I'm into that.
So, okay, let me pitch this to you as the state of the military. So, like I said, this gets into a tricky thing, and I think we can leave this in. I mean, this is like fair notes for world building as a difficulty.
Yeah.
On one hand, I like things to have a sci-fi flavor, and it does feel a little bit boring to be like, and then guns, just guns, they're guns. You know, it's like, it feels, one, bad taste in your mouth, and two, it just kind of feels like, meh, world building. Like, that's not, when I envision this world, I don't imagine people like running around with 6-shooters, you know, that just isn't what I have in my heart for what this world is meant to be. But it's a world with conflict, and again, you know, people slap each other, and then they find out that slapping each other works better with sticks, and then you start throwing sticks at each other, and then you get guns. It's like a natural progression. So there's a question that has to be answered of how conflict happens, right? And why. And I think answering the question is worthwhile, even if we're working backwards from we don't want to have guns, why not? Why would they have not been invented, or why would they have not been commonplace? So, we said way back when, mostly border skirmishes that were kind of this pseudo-Cold War, where you were like fending off raiders that were not technically affiliated with the neighboring nation, but really were. And I think that then has a great reason to have like riot control, like big, statically mounted riot control, which would be really great for like a really bad sunburn cannon, right? Like, reflects sunlight. It's like, we got raiders coming in, bzz, 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 and they're like, my skin, you know. That makes sense. Also, it maybe makes sense.
Well, those actually exist in the real world. They're basically, I don't know if they use light, but they use, those are real riot control things that we have that basically heat up an area to cause it to be really uncomfortable to be in. Right.
And this is just one that, you know, happens to reflect the sun because that's cooler, you know, which I'm fine with. We can have sci-fi stuff in this. So I think that is a good explanation for why. I think an interesting question is, what would like raiders be using? And that I think gets tricky for, they probably wouldn't be well furnished because they kind of can't be. You know what I mean? Because if you have stacks of like, if you're a well-equipped army that's attacking, it's like, okay, clearly this came from somewhere. You can't make the excuse that this was not supplied by somebody, you know? Like, if raiders roll up with a tank, it's like, well, someone made that tank. You can't fool us, you know? So right. By their nature of being kind of like highwaymen, they have to be able to pass as highwaymen. Like, oh, well, no, we're definitely not affiliated, you know? So they probably would have been less armed, you know? Like, as a necessity to keep them, like, what's it called when someone denies who they're worked for? Disavowed. They can be disavowed because they're not carrying, like, you know, because they don't have a tank, right?
Plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, right? We made these ourselves. So what would be the, like, tools of trade of, like, these highwaymen who are thieves? That is my next question.
I think in general, the weapons here are a lot more defensive because the main thing they were guarding against is theft.
The high-tech ones, for sure, yes.
Right. And so, like, that is defensive. And then on the like bandit side, you're going to want to be like super mobile, and like your ideal situation is that nobody sees you. You never use a weapon, right?
And also discreet, well hidden, you know, if it comes to a conflict.
Yes, and discreet and well hidden. And so I think even the bandits are going to have like primarily defensive things that maybe like deflect or reflect, like these more high-powered
They bring out
things.
mirrors.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's actually kind of a fun idea.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like, you're up against, like, the weapons that are being used against you.
No, that's really cool, because that basically means it's laser wars, and that's really fun. Like, imagine a neon light show laser war.
Yeah, it's very cyberpunk.
That's actually really cool. Oh, man, now I'm loving it. Okay, so, yeah, it's like this complicated...
Are you saying you weren't loving it before, Cody?
I was on the fence. Now I'm fully... Because what it would be is, like, this complicated, like, series of... It would stack, right? It's escalation. So you get better mirrors that can do more shapes and like scatter things more. So you're like always trying to like flank to get to like bounce a laser beam into something that can like actually do damage or hurt somebody. So then like the Raiders, their thing is like being able to quickly array mirrors and like bounce light around, or have like smaller ones that can shoot like more concentrated beams. I like that a lot.
You have like your
actually.
lookout who's like spotting and gonna like try to get a good angle.
Yeah.
And then you've got the people on the ground who have like really modular stuff that they can like put on their arm or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's an arms race where the people who are making the weapons try to change them up so they use a slightly different wavelength of light that maybe the mirrors don't
work on, or they don't reflect right. It can melt the mirrors. Yeah. And that makes it, and they're also reflecting from different suns, so it's gonna be multicolored.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really fun too. Yeah, okay, so what happens?
I was gonna ask, how deadly are these lasers that we're shooting?
I think they can be, but also not instantly. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I actually really like that. So, like, killing someone with one is pretty difficult because it requires time plus hit. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So like if you get a like a burn across your leg, that might like burn your leg pretty bad, but you have to like hold a laser on somebody to like actually like kill them, and then that actually works well for conflict because it's actually better to wound people than it is to kill them, which is a little bit grim, but you know, it does mean that these things are not necessarily immediately lethal, you know?
Then my thought is, since the humans are like already have some camouflage because of predators in this world, that armor isn't really a thing that was super developed.
No, because it would be really difficult. Yeah, maybe that's one of like, that might be like one of those cutting edge things because it's heat.
Right, it's heat. Like, armor is hard to build, and the camouflage you lose just makes you a huge target, and then it's just like even harder.
And then people just like focus a beam on you and you get cooked, you know?
Right, so it's just like people just like don't have armor in the way that we do, where it's like...
Or they just light the ground on fire around you and start suffocating.
Right.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, for nighttime stuff, depending on like
they use
moonlight,
the moons.
like certain moons are going to be like a bigger deal. And so like if you're like sneaking in at night, you have to like kind of know some astronomy to know if there's going to be a moon bright enough that's going to like mess up your stuff.
Yeah, that's like an officer level stuff that you can have like moon lasers too. Wow, we said moon lasers. Made a world with moon lasers, so that's cool, you know.
I love it. I guess we never really like. Remind me, we have what, two suns?
2 suns and many moons.
Many moons.
Let's say countless moons. We can always add another moon.
Right. What's the like day-night cycle?
Well, I think that it would have day and night, right? Your planet would rotate to the sun, so let's call that 24 hours, right? But I think nighttime would probably be a lot brighter because you might not have direct sunlight, but you have so many moons reflecting that light back on you, and that would all be multicolored as well. Because
but I guess if we're in a binary star system, I don't really know how binary star systems work.
I believe
do they just orbit each other in the middle and then we orbit around that? Is that how that works?
I want us to figure eight these suns. I don't know if that happens. I don't know if it's possible. I want us to figure eight these suns.
I thought it was 2 suns were orbiting each other and then you're orbiting on the outside.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is like, is that how that works? I don't actually know.
I don't think we figure eight the sun, Zach. That's a little too flat. I know I'm never supposed to say no, but that's a little too flat Earth.
No, I want them to figure eight the suns. That way there's a point of the year where you're like the suns are warring. So it's like always day, but it's different colors.
He just wants to create a 3-body problem and have us solve it.
No, I don't think that works for what we had talked about before, though. Like, that is counter to what we had already established. I do like the idea, though, that there's figure eightists that are like a cult, like a paranoid cult. They're like, we actually move in a figure eight! Like, we've proven...
That's our flat Earth society, got it.
We've proven on paper that we do not move in a figure eight around the sun. It's like, you don't understand, it makes an infinity sign! This is how the celestial bodies were meant to be! And they want to like go and they're called solar correctionists. They think that the solar system is in disarray. Yeah, they want to solar correct. You know, your idea is bad when I make a whole cult society around it. Oh
no!
Sorry, Zach. Your idea is now in the game as a cult.
All right, so I looked it up real quick, and according to a Google or Yahoo Answers-esque site, there are 3 types of ways they orbit. There's the S-type where you just orbit one star, and there's like, so you have 2 stars, and you just orbit one of them. There's the P-type where you just orbit both stars like in an oval.
Yeah, which is, I think, what we had said, yeah.
And then there's one that's called T-type, which we haven't seen in real life yet, but it's where basically the planet and one of the stars are both orbiting the first star.
Oh, okay. So none of them are figure eights, though.
None of them are figure eight.
So yeah.
Solar correctionists.
Solar correctionists. They think that they think the solar system is out of balance and it is meant to form an infinity sign because that's how nature is intended to function. They think everything, like rivers and stuff, all move.
Oh, nope. Someone did the math. It is possible to have a figure eight, but it would be very chaotic.
What do you mean by chaotic?
I think orbiting two suns in a figure eight would be ridiculous in the cycles of everything.
Yeah, I think chaos in this situation means hard to predict.
Yeah.
And the mathematical chaos.
Yes.
Meaning.
I think that there would only be like 2 months out of a year where you're not in constant daylight. You would always be getting direct sunlight. The world would like catch on fire, Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Sorry, Zach, but you did get to make the first cult, which is fun. The first conspiracy cult. You got to do that.
I'm not upset about it.
I mean, I made the cult in the last game. It was due for someone else to
Right, there you go.
to make one.
Right. Someone else has to make a cult.
I'll name it the Cultist Sunche.
Have we all made a cult now? Because I made a. Doesn't matter. We don't gotta start comparing cult notes. Okay. I like light battles. That answers an important question, and it answers it in a really fun way. So good job brainstorming, everybody. I didn't have a good answer for that. And the idea of like the light cycle-esque, like, trying to get in the way of it. Then you can also do, it's like strategy where you like try to put up beams in tactical places so people can't walk through areas without getting hurt. And then you got people who's you have like really acrobatic people whose job it is to basically like do that scene and like, when you have to steal something, you got to get through
every heist movie. Yeah.
Yeah, they have to like jump through all the lasers. That's like a thing.
Gosh, this is so cool.
Which makes sense then why there's like this complicated sport that is centered around like
obstacles,
acrobatic problem solving, because that's basically what conflict looks like, is acrobatic problem solving.
This is the best.
That's a way different form of laser tag.
Yeah, it's basically complicated laser tag, and then that, okay, so it works. The point is it works, and I love it. So now we're gonna flip sides here. Oh man, I just keep liking it more.
Can we move on though, so we can like finish this tonight?
Yeah, we can. I'm just gonna keep geeking out about this because it's really good.
Which means I'm gonna hear about it after.
Yeah, it works. It works so well. It means that it, like having shows of force requires a lot. It doesn't matter.
Anyway,
doesn't matter. We're gonna move on. I like a lot of that. So I want to flip now to, we know what society is like on the corporate side, right? They are slowly losing interest from not having enough food to feed standing armies. They can't get a military through these eco urbs.
Do you mean the governmental side?
And the corporate side, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying like that side of society, right? Like,
okay, yeah.
They basically fortify what eco urbs they can. They're trying to push further in, but the more they do that, it's like kind of back to this jungle warfare kind of thing where they're like trekking through wasteland and now overgrown land, trying to get to eco urbs that are defended, and they'll hit like these complicated like light mazes where it's like we just can't figure out, we don't even know where the mirrors are set up. We don't know how they're getting sunlight through the canopy of these trees that are growing up, Meanwhile, the people that have been there for a long time can take the time to like set up their really complicated mirror defenses. So that's like, it's fighting itself to a stalemate. There's conflicted eco urbs, but it's always challenging, right?
I also like the idea that the eco urbs defense, they also just have more physical defenses than they're used to. Or it's just like, what if we just put up like a wall with like spikes going outwards? And they're like, well, we don't have armor. We can't get past this. Like, it's just impassable.
We can't walk around spikes. We've lost.
Well, it's not that, but it's like a tall wall, and they have like spikes pointing out, and they're like, if we sit there, they're just going to burn us with lasers.
Well, and they also have sustainable food, so it's like you siege the city, and it's like, well, they make their own food in there. Dang it.
Right, like I like that idea where it's just like they're just like, oh, this is like a really like easy thing if you like developed any amount of armor, and they're like, we have none of that.
Yeah,
absolutely none.
Well, because they'd be used to again playing this like on a tower defensive game, so it's doing something they've never done before, which is like taking an established city rather than defending one, which is all they've been doing. So it works. So now, though, I want to flip to the other side. Let's talk about what the Eco Urbs are doing. And this is maybe the more enjoyable part of this, which is, what does a society look like that starts to grow out of these Eco Urbs that begin networking themselves together to help each other fix their Eco Urbs?
I don't know, man. Moon lasers was pretty enjoyable.
Right, I'm gonna be like, are you gonna be more excited about anything than moon lasers tonight?
Yeah. You know, having to have an astronomer on site so that you can run your moon lasers is pretty good. Like, put up the lunar collectors, like, the what moon isn't an apex yet? It can't be done!
And of course you have one of them yell, "I cannot change the laws of physics!"
Yeah, it's all that. Yep. It's really good. It's really good, guys. I like it. Okay, so, flipping to the other side, Eco Urbs, this Eco Urb detaches itself and then starts trying to communicate with more and more Eco Urbs. What society forms out of this? This is basically us defining the proto version of our modern society, right? I just asked you guys to define something nice, and it's just like,
well, no, I'm confused.
Radio silence.
I'm confused by your question. You said what society? Are you talking about, like, when you say, or not society? You said I can't remember the word that you used already, but are you talking like the group of like pirates that are fighting this? Are you talking about the
the whole thing, right? So
Eco Urb culture.
What does Eco Urb culture look like when totally separated from like corporate? You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Okay.
How do they function? How do they get more people on their side? What does their military look like? Who gets sent? How do they handle basically everything that they ever need to do just inside of their little town, you know?
I think one of the biggest tenets that comes out of this first one and just kind of is the foundation for basically every Eco Urb that goes dark following is the freedom of information.
Okay, you're a librarian, I get it, but yeah, I like that.
Well, that's exactly why I'm like, how do I say this without just sounding like a librarian? But, like, the thing is, like, not that, like, they make laws in the same way, but it's like proprietary technology is just basically illegal in this place.
Open data!
It just doesn't exist. Yeah, it just isn't the way it's done. Doesn't need to make a law about it. It's just fundamentally not what they are doing.
Right.
So the funny thing is, freedom of information is actually the name of the Act of Parliament in the UK for how citizens can get data from their government.
Yeah.
It's just funny that you use that exact term, is that's an actual thing in a country, a real country.
Mandy's doing the universal sign if I'm putting up my hand and I have something to say. Mandy, what's up?
I just wanted to, because a lot of times things get going, and especially since you're running the game, I need to make sure I say I'm going to.
No, I appreciate that. I'm not complaining.
So I think one of the things that starts driving people into the Eco Urb once the corporation is out of it is, you and I have talked about this outside of the podcast, which is the idea of free time. So with the corporations, they were saying, oh, you could join this Eco Urb and, you know, you only have to work 20 hours a week. But really it ends up being like closer to a normal work week. Or
more, yeah.
Or more. I believe we were saying like 80 hours or something crazy like constant, that.
Yeah.
But I think without the corporation, since you're not having to pay them back, all of a sudden the idea of like, oh, I can be invested in what I want to do starts becoming more of a thing. Now, I do think it fully depends on like who is the high person in charge. Because I think I said in the last episode that that's the person that's kind of like helping get things running. But like once you have the foundation of like there is I keep going back to the school because I feel like I can talk about that. But once you have like the teacher in place, it's like, well, is that what does the person who's the teacher actually want to keep teaching the kids? Or is there somebody else who feels like they could do that? Or, you know, hey, I was an office manager. I really want to be invested in taking care of animals now. So it's like, okay, well, I can do that because I'm the main thing that I'm focused on is just making sure that we grow food and do like the normal community stuff.
Yeah, so I guess to clarify the whole like free time versus 20 hours a week thing. So like,
yeah, we definitely should make that clear because you and I have
I think we talked about it before in an earlier episode, but I can clarify it again. So The idea is that the like necessities of life are handled by everybody 20 hours a week, right? That is, you're growing food, handling waste, recycling trash, the stuff that you need to do to keep society on its feet at all, right? Anything beyond that then is not compulsory. But Mandy, you touched on, but that doesn't mean there isn't anything beyond that. It just means that what is required of you by society is that 20 hours a week, you make sure that we all have food, water, and shelter. You know what I mean? And that's the responsibility of everybody. Now, you touched on one thing, which is government. That's an interesting one. What do we imagine government looks like in these Eco Urbs? So at first it was, they basically had a mayor who was appointed by, you know, the government way back in the cities, right? That would send a mayor out there and go, you're in charge of this Eco Urb, you run it, right? This first Eco Urb that goes dark, does it go dark and keep that mayor in power? Or what does the government that they look like, or what does the government that they make look like?
I think they do not keep the person in power. They go the Calvinist route of the Reformation, where everything about the Catholic Church is bad. Like, everything about the cities and corporations is bad, so they kind of just, like, throw a lot out, even if it was not inherently bad. But they're like...
They might have liked their mayor, but he was part of the establishment. He was appointed by the establishment.
He needed to be removed even if he was a good guy, yeah. Or he needed to be moved past even if he was a good guy, yeah.
I think the governments are, developed to be much looser. They're much less bureaucratic, and you just kind of like, there's someone who's in charge, but they're just more just like monitoring to make sure.
Is there someone that's in charge? Like, do we think this is like a president situation, or is it a council? Okay, Mandy, I saw Mandy first, so Mandy then Caitlin.
I think, and I'm gonna be really loose here, but I really think it kind of depends on the Eco Urb.
I like that idea.
So
non-standard.
I think the first one, I totally agree with you. I think they're like anti-establishment, get out of here, we don't need you anymore. But as other ones start changing over to being completely self-sustaining, I think that there's like the mayor that was in charge, and he's like, oh, but I will totally, like, I like you guys, and I'm gonna make this good for all of us. So, and he kind of gets ahead of it. So it's like, I'm not gonna screw you guys over if you keep me in power. But then maybe in other ones, you know, it's like, well, we don't need the one person. We can have a group of people who all like have prominent positions in the community. Like, somebody has to be in charge of like the scheduling for the gardens, or like maybe there is somebody who just has that green thumb and they're like, well, I can do this, and there's going to be a person who's in charge of distributing. That person is also in charge. And it really just depends on the Eco Urb and who they are, which means with ours, with the one that we're in, we could decide that later on. But
that's fair. That's a fair point. I like everything that you just said. Caitlin, what's up?
I was going to suggest, like, kind of along the lines of Mandy's affinity groups of like people being able to go where their like interests lay. I was going to suggest a less centralized form of government that was more, I don't know if modular is the right word, but like more divided into sectors. So there's like somebody who's managing, like biology and food, but they don't run the whole town.
Right.
And so like there's like heads of departments kind of, and like they all have to work together so that the whole town functions, but people are relying on expertise of those people who are like project managing.
That's a much better way to say what I was trying to.
Yeah, the way that I was thinking about it, I tried not to like cue you up for like, here's my suggestion. And then you made my suggestion, which was, yeah, like I could imagine like some kind of like council of head people of like, we need to build new houses. That requires a lot of people to talk to, you know, like we need supplies, we need workers, we need electricity run, we need, you know, plumbing, we need all these different things that are and we need to decide what we want it to look like. And that requires like a decision to be made between multiple interested groups. So like guild heads meeting and talking made sense to me, you know, like, and yeah, one of those guild heads might be like in charge. I said guild, but doesn't have to be, you know, I was thinking like, yeah, someone in charge of the gardens, like we need to build a new house. Like, does that impact gardening? Probably. What does it need to look like? You know, like, how can we sustain that? What do we need to plant around it? That kind of stuff. So I like that.
So with what we're saying, so the government kind of just like steers away from what it is in the real world currently to being just like much more just administrative. Is that what we're kind of saying? Where it's just like,
no, almost that's all it is. Like, there is need for administration, right? Like, if you go, I want to put a road right through the middle of town. It's like, well, that's going to destroy 5 buildings. Someone has to like decide if that is okay, inform everybody, get them to move, like do all the eminent domain stuff. You know what I mean? So like there's a need for administration, right? Like you need someone to...
No, that's what I'm saying. It becomes more of that and less of what it is.
I think maybe the question is, do we want there to be a group of people that are politicians that are divorced from the thing that they're interested in?
I think it depends on the Eco Urb.
Well, and that could be different. And maybe, we could say this is specifically designing for our own,
I would say for our own, no. I think everyone is involved. I think actually, no. I think for Eco Urbs, no one is divorced from what they're doing. No one's job can be just being politics because they still have to get their hands dirty and grow the food and build the houses and do all the stuff. So I don't think it is able to be in an Eco Urb and be like, this is all I do. Like, that's more of a hobby.
They don't have spare people.
Yeah, they don't have like statesmen, basically. There isn't an aristocracy.
Yeah.
Right.
I was thinking along those same lines where, it's like the people in charge of each department are someone who is an expert or has some kind of expertise in that department.
Yeah.
And that's how they got the job. And then I'd imagine if it's some decision that involves multiple different departments together, like your example of putting a road through the middle of town, that would probably need someone from the building department and the planting department and like all these other things.
Right. How much garden are we destroying for this new building? What are we going to have to plant there now? How do we handle the waste? Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that it's a decision among all of the department heads with probably even public feedback. Like they have town hall meetings where they talk about
they have Parks and Rec town hall meetings.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not like the politics of it. It's literally them just saying, here's the thing. What do people think about this? They get the opinions of the public and then decide, like, vote amongst themselves. Yay or nay, kind of
so
thing.
Like there are parties, but you're only running basically within your party. It's like, oh wow, so many hands.
Mine was first.
You guys can talk. It's just fine. Okay, Zach said he was first.
I vote instead of calling them department heads, I want them to be called mediators because they're the person who has to talk to each other.
I like that. That like it's like is it an internally elected position? So like all the metal workers in a city elect a mediator, or is it like dynastic? Like I hand it down to my son.
I think it is elected, but I think it's not just all the metal workers. I think it's like the town. Well, I think it'll depend town to town, but in general, I think it's more than just that. So it's not like one area can just be like, well, we like Bill and he's a jerk and he'll get what only focus on metal workers. I think that it's kind of more of a unanimous thing in the town. Like it's one of the town hall meeting things you do. It's like, well, we need to, like, Bill's retiring from being the metal worker mediator.
The metalhead. No, let's go with metalhead. That's his title. Bill the metalhead.
I mean, different Eco Urbs can call it different things, and some of them are definitely going to call it the metalhead.
and of course, Federico being a metal worker and like a craftsman, he is good friends with Bill.
And I think the metalhead would hate you because you're a charlatan. You are constantly at odds with the metalhead.
He doesn't know that. I'm very charismatic.
We can't be giving spoilers about our characters yet, Vinny.
Oh, that's right. I guess we didn't record episode 0, did we?
Anyway, I think what it is like the metal group union has more of a say on who they elect, but I think the rest of the town like also kind of approves it, so it's not... Can
I pitch this as a suggestion?
No.
You vote for what things you are interested in. So like everyone would vote for like the head of the gardens, stuff like that, like maybe like housing. There are things that are like everyone votes for. And then there are other things that are like, no, this is like specifically voted within the thing that it is, right? But you'll be in multiple groups, right? So you don't belong to just one party. It's like you're going to be in like 7 and you'll vote in each of those 7 things. Some of those are everybody, some of those aren't. It depends on the position. And then those people are the ones that just sit and meet in the mediation council and talk,
Ooh. Oh, I kind of like that, because then it could be like, if you have to like have some passing knowledge about the department to even have a vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
For some of them, right? So like for the garden, everyone would vote for. For like maybe schools, like you either have to be a teacher or have kids, it's like, or be in school, depending on what age, right? For, like...
Man, imagine a society where the people in power actually have proficiency in anything.
I know, isn't it pretty to think so?
The problem is we're making these societies, and yeah, they're not perfect, but it's like, it just points out all of the problems with our own society and makes me sad.
This is supposed to be a fun world to play in,
Yeah, but then it just reminds me of our actual failings.
It only makes me want to scream a little bit.
It's bittersweet, is what I'll say. I was going to say, it reminds me of being in a small liberal arts college where you're part of like 7 different clubs that you have an affinity for, and so you're voting in those things.
Yeah, right. It's supposed to feel like a community. Okay. Is there anything else that we want to define about the Eco Urbs for right now?
No, Zach already defined what the leader position would be called, which I was going to do.
What were you going to call it?
I was going to call them organizers. Organizers of units.
Mediators is better.
It actually, look, Caitlin, usually you knock it out of the park with the naming, but I actually got to side with Zach on this one.
Yeah.
Mediators is pretty good.
Well, and it also like the community thing. Where
I get it.
It's so good.
I was more just upset that you were zeroing in on the thing that I was going to zero in on, but it was.
I raised my hand to do it first, and then you raised your hand, and Cody's like, "Oh, you can go in any order." I'm like, "No, you can't. Don't you dare."
But can I propose that they're called units? So, like, you're the mediator of X unit?
Sure. I like that.
Okay.
Unit mediators.
I like unions better.
Well, I wanted to stay away from, like,
actual words.
Unions in our world.
Yeah.
But unions in our world are great.
I just didn't want to, bleed, No,
I got you. Units is fine.
Do you want to start calling these calms as well, Caitlin? Anyways,
well, we need to talk about the pirates, don't we?
Well, yes. So I do want to define a little bit more what the... Sorry, go ahead.
I remember something I wanted to add is I think this is me being who I am and my profession being what it is. I think this is the first time like libraries really take off, but they're slightly different than what libraries are in our world. They're much more like... They're both, like, books of information and, like, how to do different hobbies, because, like, no one's had free time, like, ever. So, like, if you learn how to paint, like, you write a book, and then it's like, everyone's like, oh, this is how you paint. But also, like, there are people there where you can just, like, go in and talk to them, basically, like, apprentice with them. Like, it's like...
It's a human library.
Like a human library in addition to, like, a book library.
It's a physical brick-and-mortar Udemy.
No.
Yes.
Do you not know Udemy?
I know what you're talking about.
Or Skillshare, or any of those.
No, and I think that's kind of a cool idea, too, that, like, that's another, like, maybe not what the mediator does, or actually maybe that is, like, part of what the mediator is supposed to do, is, like, outreach for their group, Like, that's part of it, is going, like, all right, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then that can be, like, the Wikipedia to then actually like delving in and learning a real skill. Like if you want the Wikipedia stuff, you can go to the library and go like, oh, hey, this is how this works. And it's like, you want to delve in more? We got people for that, and you can start job shadowing or whatever. I like that as like the way that knowledge is spread and disseminated.
And I think
is that group going to be mobile as more Eco Urbs go dark from the government and stuff?
So then this is the other half of this that we do need to discuss, is that spread of information. So like I said, I think the first way that is done is riverboat captains, right? I like the idea that riverboats become an important means of transportation because they are very cheap and don't require a lot of like impact to the environment, right?
And it's kind of hard to blockade a river.
Right. Yeah. Also that. So I think that the furthest out Eco Urb starts running riverboats to other Eco Urbs to communicate with them, right? And that could be at first sending like, mediators. Maybe that's the first time the term comes from, is like, look, we sent these 10 people that are the best at what they do. They can get your Eco Urb running, right? And then they kind of like are transient groups. So I think that is, as Zach said, our pirates.
The sea librarians.
But I also think then that becomes like the interception point for like if they are going to try to cut supply lines. Like this would be a time when there are lots of skirmishes between like riverboats full of people trying to like help other Eco Urbs and like company mercenaries / actual soldiers trying to like blockade those and stop those riverboats. So I think that would be like the conflict of the time.
So you gotta have like a pirate riverboat astronomer.
Yeah. Yeah. Whose job it is to blast, moon lasers at other people.
This is a silly thing. Do the pirate librarians have grenades?
No, they just have mirrors and solar collectors and lunar collectors and all that stuff.
I also like the idea of them just getting more primitive, quote unquote, with their tech. Whereas it's like, the mercenary boat's there and like, we got our lasers, we're gonna try to burn the ship down, and they just like put a metal wedge on the front and just like drive right into the blockade. And they're like,
yeah,
can't stop us. And they're just like, oh no, what do we do? Our boats aren't built for this. They're built to be heat resistant.
Yeah. No, that's funny, actually. Yeah, I like that it's kind of, like thinking on the fly and like building rapid tech for what they need in the moment, like, oh, these river conflicts are getting tough, like, coat our boats in metal, go faster, just smash through them. We got the current behind us.
That's a really good idea, though, too. They don't even have to do a boat. They can just, like, coat something in metal and just chuck it at the blockade and not have people on it.
I mean, this was like what happened in the Civil War, right? When it was like two Ironside boats just shot at each other for like a day and they couldn't sink each other. I believe that was like a famous military battle, is that they coated the sides of two boats in steel and neither one could sink the other. They just were like, thunk, 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 forever. And they were just like, it's a draw.
Just playing the bongos in the sea.
we both made bulletproof boats. Dang it. Okay, so is there anything else we want to define for this time?
Can't think of anything.
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of like DM narration here, just me telling you guys some stuff. So I think that this long and slow transition from a centralized power around Eco Urbs to not, it kind of never exactly goes away. It just keeps shrinking to the point where it's kind of like, at some point wasn't the Holy Roman Empire like just Germany, and it called itself the Holy Roman Empire, and it was the size of Germany?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, basically, when after Rome fell, the Holy Roman Empire moved to what is now like mostly Germany, parts of northern Italy.
And my point with that is basically like for like even now probably there's like 5 Eco Urbs that are like, we're the national Eco Urbs, and we stuck with it, and we're banded together and we all share stuff, and they're like kind of still there saying that they're the national Eco Urbs, but that just eventually like, the blight got bad enough, people got old enough, there weren't as many children being born outside of Eco Urbs that eventually it just like they kept losing grounds like slowly over this time as these companies like lost more and more power and were not able to actually like grab those Eco Urbs, right? So by, we will say age 4, which is like an external challenge, basically most of the world now is just Eco Urbs that can communicate via satellites. A lot of transportation is done through riverboats. There's patchwork rail between some of them, and there really is no longer a centralized government, right? So this is the world as it stands, where there is going to be some large external challenge. Now, Mandy has a really good idea for that external challenge, but I also don't want to tell anyone no. So, Mandy, pitch your idea, and then if anyone wants to stack on top of it, feel free.
Okay, so my idea for an external challenge is that 2 more moons collide.
Oh, that's real good.
Now, from like a physical world standpoint, not a lot actually ends up happening. It creates a second ring around the world. But what this does create is a lot of internal panic. So
I'm stacking on top of this, by the way.
I'm sure you are, because why wouldn't you? In early, I don't remember the name I gave these people. I wrote it down somewhere. Stelic. In early Stelic religion, 2 moons collided, and it was like 2 goddesses going to war in the mythology. And so there is a little bit of that because the religion has started coming back. There's
we forgot to mention that. That is worth noting, that the Eco Urb saw like birth or refocusing on religion?
We mentioned it last episode.
Okay.
And so that's still been kind of growing. And I've been focused on the Stelic religion, so I kind of view it as like that's a very, very nature-based one, because they can assign different moon goddesses to different things. So that's like been slowly coming back as the world goes back to a more natural state. And I think the telling of the two goddesses fighting was like, yeah, but that was such a long time ago. No one, like, that would never happen again, despite all our many, many moons. And it does happen again. And so I think a lot of people see this and take it as like a bad omen that, oh my gosh, we're doing the wrong thing. The world is going to end.
All right, anyone else want to stack on top of that? Zach, you have your hand up so hard.
I want to say, like, it's mostly internal. I don't want to take that away. But I think there is some moon debris that falls down.
That's what I was going to say.
Fair.
And it's not common, but it's also not rare. I think for, like, there's a season where there's, like, multiple Eco Urbs that just, like, their crops are crushed or lit on fire by falling moon meteorites.
Or some equipment is destroyed.
Right.
That's, like, kind of vital.
Significant damage to the rail system.
Yeah, some stuff like that where it's just, like, enough that it's, like, it's a mild crisis for a few Eco Urbs, and enough to make everyone else kind of, like, mildly panic, where it's just, like, well, 3 Eco Urbs over, like, their, like, irrigation system got hit by a chunk of moon dust.
Yeah, now they're having to do backflips to try to fix it, yeah.
Right, and it's just like, what if that happens to us? Like, you know, and like, people are freaking out even though it only hits, you know, half a dozen across the whole planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I want to add to the religion, though. I think after this calms down a little bit, these moon chunks are considered, like, very religious objects.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
Oh, if you find them out in the wilderness?
Right, like, I think the culture I want to evolve around that is, like, carving things out of them, whether it's practical or just, like, symbolic, is a practice people do. Like, you find a moon chunk, you get to carve something out of it for yourself.
Yeah, and then, okay, well, I have things to add on to that, but we'll get into it later. That's flavor for Cody later on down the line, like the metalhead, the NPC that you guys definitely accidentally made, who now exists very weirdly in our world. All right, anyone else got anything they want to stack on top of that? Because then I have my GM notes.
Nope, that sounds good.
Cool. All right, so here's the GM notes. You know, these two things collide. There are meteor showers. Occasionally it's like, man, this Eco Urb over here, not great. Got its irrigation knocked out. There's some fires. There was some destruction. The rail's not as good as it used to be. Man, the forest is getting really grown up now. It's really hard to get between places without rail. And then the satellites get hit by the debris field and come crashing down, and all the communication globally goes dead. Thanks for listening to this episode of Wanderlust. Music for this show is credited down below. If you like this campaign, you can find more of our shows at the Wandering Gamer website or on Podbean. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Links in the description. Now bear in mind, in the wilds, some wander to get lost, and some wander to find themselves.